I'm Zach Powers. I am an author. I am also the director of communications at the Writers Center. One of the cool things I got to do is this. So thank you all for coming and letting me do it. I know some of you know the Writers Center, but I know many of you are coming from all over. The Writers Center is a literary arts nonprofit that supports writers and everyone who wants to write. We're headquartered in Bethesda, Maryland, which is, just outside of DC. So we consider ourselves sort of a DC area organization. But during the shutdown, we've moved everything online, and this is one of our online events. And we do online workshops throughout the year, even when we are normally open. So you're not finding something entirely new for us, but we're adapting with the times. For this event, we are partnering with East City Bookshop. It's one of the DC area's, a fist bump from Amy. It's a bookshop on Capitol Hill in DC. It's a really great indie bookstore. We love them. So if you're considering pre-ordering Ed's book or any other book that you may be looking for, we encourage you to order your book from them or whoever your favorite local independent bookstore is. One of the best ways you can support the publishing industry, the best ways you can support writers, is to support your local independent bookstores. They're the ones that that we rely on a lot to keep going. And finally, the Writers Center is, in fact, a nonprofit, and Amy would be mad at me if I did not hold up my handmade sign with our donation information. There it is. So you can donate to the Writers Center via Venmo, which is at Writers-Center, or at PayPal at info@writer.org. And also, if you'd like to, one of the things we fundraise for is for our scholarship fund. The workshops that we offer every year, we offer about 300 a year. They do cost money, but we do have a generous scholarship fund. And donating to that helps people who want to take our workshops. It helps the center, it helps our mission. So if you're interested, please go to our website as well and find out more at writer.org. Amy, I'm gonna just pretend that you're putting all this in the chat as I say. Yes, Amy's got my back. So we're here today with a debut novelist, Edward A. Farmer. Here's the book. It's not actually out yet, so I'm very special in having this fancy advance copy. Also, I love the cover. I love red text on red background, but still, anyway, sorry, I'm really happy with that. So, Edward, who are you?
So I first want to just thank you, Zach, and also thank the wonderful people at the Writers Center for having me today and for hosting this event. And also shout out to East City Bookshop as well. Go local bookstores. And just a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee. And it's so funny because I love to talk about the South. They try to say that Memphis is sort of the Midwest, and they try to lump it into all these weird categories. But I grew up right at the border of Tennessee and Mississippi, right by the state line. And yeah, I spent my entire childhood in Memphis. And then I went off to Amherst College for 4 years. And then I went back to Tennessee and finally moved to California, where I am today.
You've pretty much covered everything now. You got like this nice triangle going.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have your book handy, and is there a brief section you'd like to read to us just to give a taste of the writing?
Yes, I do. I have my trusty advanced reader copy as well. Yeah, right? I'm still waiting on the real deal to come through. Yeah, but I would like to just read a brief section from the beginning of the novel. There are, of course, no spoilers in the beginning of the book. So I'm just going to read a brief section from the beginning of Pale. Chapter 1. Young people see cotton as beautiful, something to roll around in until their eyes bob like apples and they become dizzy. A cool place to hide their feet on summer days along that base where weeds grow, but never too long before the chop of a steady hoe. Let daddy tell it, those white stalks were no different than the white man, a devil he'd known all his life out in Crenshaw, Mississippi, the place of his birth. You don't know that white face until it works you, he'd say, coming through the front door tired and sore. His hands knotted like ropes as he wrung out the tension through cracks of his knuckles. But Daddy left this world to be with the Lord a long time ago, and only Henry was left by my side. When Henry left, I had no one. He was supposed to send for me, but never did. Together, we were going to live out a life far away from this wretched place we knew as home. On the first day, all joy I had for his journey faded just as fast as mop water on a sun-licked floor, as I feared his passage had met its end somewhere out in the black heart of Mississippi. Yet slowly, as the days dragged on, those images were but pebbles inside my mind that rattled around whenever my spirit sank so low. I knew he'd somehow made it and was now starting a life for us, and that I would soon join him. After 2 months, I knew my letter would arrive any day, and that we would be free in that place we dreamed about together. We'd lie barefoot on the sand, feeling it clump between our toes like the red dirt that chipped along the countryside and made the pathways muddy. We'd open a basket of figs and natal plums, and we'd eat selfishly, never fearing the weight of that white hand pressed over our lives again. At 3 months, the sorrow came once more, along with visions of his death. At 4 months, I checked for his name in the obituaries almost daily. At 5 months, I wrote to the bus station to no avail. And at 6 months, I just gave up, not on him, but of any hope I had of ever leaving, for with him went all of our money. At night, I dreamt of his face merged with the countryside, the rounds of his eyes in perfect harmony with the passing fields as he watched through bus windows a land that had betrayed him. On other nights, I dreamt he died by the hands of the Klan, and his body was strung up like a welcome banner for everyone to see. I watched as my strong husband fought, then bled and died on the streets of Sumner with no one there to mourn him, his blood a hot trickle along the cracks in the gutter curb as it coagulated into a cold clay and became the earth.
Thank you. One quick thing, if you have any questions throughout our talk, if you type them into the chat there, if you're on your computer and you hover your mouse over the bottom of the screen, there's a little chat function. You can just type your question there and we'll keep up with them. I'll call some as we go along. I'll save some for the end, but we're happy to try to get to everyone's question if you have them along the way. So just casual summary, what is this novel about?
Yes. So the novel tells the story of Bernice, who in 1966, as the opening states, she is left by her husband. Her husband leaves and is supposed to send for her, but he never does. She then receives an invitation from her brother to come live with him in Greenwood, Mississippi on a cotton plantation. And she accepts that invitation. And that begins her, her crazy experience with the Kern family, where that summer, 2 brothers arrive to work as cotton pickers, and they are sons of the house servant Silva. Well, with their emergence comes a lot of vengeance from the missus of the house, who plans to get revenge on everyone in the house, basically. So starts the story.
Yeah. We'll get, I have a whole category of questions here under the heading villainy exclamation point. So we'll return to the misses here at some point. But
Yes.
Just to the origins of this novel, though. So we talked about this before we actually started. For those who've come on since then, you and I, we have the same agent. So when I told her that I'd set up this event, I said, what should I ask? And the one thing she mentioned, though, was that the origins of this novel came from 2 places that she mentioned. One was a dream,
Yes.
that you had, and the second was also the fact that your parents worked cotton fields.
Yes.
So I'm just interested, first of all, when did you know this was going to be a book? When did you have this idea? When did it become a book for you? When was this story a book?
Yes. So it did start as a dream. I had a simple dream where there was a Black woman who worked for a family, and there were lots of children around her. And the children treated her meanly, and then the adults of the house treated her meanly. And so when I woke up from the dream, it was so vivid that I started to write the first lines of the book. I didn't know what it was about, but I wanted to know her story. And so the first line started with, he was supposed to send for me, but never did. And from that line, I continued to write. I didn't know if it would be a short story. And I was hoping it would be a short story because I didn't want the pain of writing a novel. And, but I think it was by 6,000 words, I knew, okay, this story is not wrapping up. If anything, it's getting bigger and more intense, and I need to follow it till the end. And so I sort of followed that journey of it departed from the dream. The dream started the story, and then the story it gained legs and took off.
Well, I'm glad it grew. I also know
Yes.
that feeling really well. Like, oh God, this is still going.
Yes.
It's one of the worst and best feelings as a writer. Like, oh God,
Yes.
it won't stop.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
And I think I knew, as far as with the stories of the cotton fields. So I grew up with these stories. My mom would always talk about the cotton fields and working the cotton. And it turned into this situation where I hated the stories growing up because I'm like, oh, I don't want to hear about the cotton one more time. Like, please. We couldn't pass a cotton field without her or my dad mentioning something about that cotton because we were surrounded by cotton. And so, but as I started to write this story, I was very appreciative of those stories that my mom had told me because I was able to understand what it's like to work the fields and to they didn't live on a plantation, but they had worked on plantations.
So how does that dream and how does that reality, the learned reality at least from your parents, how do those two come together for you? How do the fantasy and the reality interact?
Yes. It's funny because it's definitely a story of fiction. So the fantasy aspect, it takes over because I really wanted to explore this idea of a house filled with secrets and filled with vengeance. And I wanted the fantasy part to take over. And I think the fields, the part of my family's experiences in the fields, it comes into play when I think about the struggles that the characters are going through, particularly the African American characters in the story. When I write about how it is to be under a hot sun with dust all around you and made to work, I think that that's where the reality of the stories I heard come into play, and then I'm able to couple it with a big imagination as to what it would be like to live in a house or to work in a house that is filled with so much anger.
That's really fascinating. Sorry, I'm thinking about this now and I'm getting distracted from my own line of questioning. Um, so how much did you actually tap into family history here? Was it really just sort of did you just sort of pick and choose some details and like just this almost subconscious memory or of stories you'd heard, or did you actually pull any specifics from family history?
Yeah, I think I didn't want to reignite my mom into her storytelling mode. So I didn't tap her too hard, but I did remember the stories quite vividly. And so I think it helps as a writer when you can go back to something that's tangible. So when when I was writing the story and I would get to a scene where they're in the fields, I say, okay, how can I describe this in the best way possible, in a way that's accurate? And then I would tap into those stories that my mom had told. And I was able to get very clearly how it is to be in the fields and then couple it with let my imagination take over at that point.
Was there any point where you decided something was private? Was there a point where you started writing and drawing from the reality and said, whoa, hold on. No, that's a story that is my mom's. That's not going on the page. Did you ever run into that?
I didn't actually. I wanted the story because I consider myself to be a discovery writer. So I'm learning the book as I'm writing it, and I'm reading it. I'm writing it as the reader, and as a reader, and the story is unfolding. And so, if something came out as true, I didn't want to take it away. I wanted the story to be as true as possible, and I can explain that to my family later. Say, okay, look, this is what the story was. I didn't write it; the narrator said it. So, but yeah, I did not hold back.
The old narrator alibi.
Yes.
I like it. So just sort of broadly, we're talking a little bit about people from the South being Southern writers. Where do you think you fit into Southern literature? I'm from the South, but I wrote a novel about the Soviet space program, so I've screwed up the whole concept of Southern writer. But I mean, your novel's set in the South.
Yes.
It's dealing with a very Southern subject too.
Yes.
So not necessarily uniquely Southern, but one that we're familiar with.
Yes.
How do you think you fit into Southern literature with this novel? Were you thinking of that at all when you wrote it, or do you think about it now after the fact?
It's funny because I did not think about it as I wrote it, but I do think about it now because that that question has come up. And I love the idea of even being considered a Southern writer and having written Southern literature, because when I wrote it, I was just trying to write a true and honest story. And I was trying to write something that I knew, because I spent so much time in Greenwood, Mississippi, and I love the drive from Memphis to Greenwood. It's about 2 hours. And those drives were the best times of my life. Just being in the pickup and driving down to see family and to cut the grass, to plant mulch, just to lay mulch, to do all of those things is what I loved. So I wanted to tell a story of something that I loved. And even my experience working on the farms. I used to feed the pigs and throw, slop at them. And those experiences, I wanted to tell that true and honest experience. And I hope that when people read it, they do get a sense of the South, and it's an honest depiction of the South.
Just a quick reminder to everyone, if you have questions along the way, please use the chat feature. I will keep an eye on it and intersperse your questions with my own and save some for the end. So we're now to my favorite header of my questions, which was villainy, exclamation point.
Yes.
So the main antagonist throughout most of the novel, or not the whole, if not the whole novel, is the Mrs. of the Kern House. She is a volatile, hateable, in some way understandable, but not relatable character.
Yes.
Was she someone that appeared fully formed to you, or did she evolve along the way as you were writing?
She definitely evolved. When she first emerged into the story, it was really weird. I saw her in the room. She was in a dark room, and I was immediately fascinated. I said, why is she in this dark room? What's going on with this person? And even her first responses were so cold. And that was striking to me. I say this as if I did not write it, but it was striking to me because I wanted to know what her story was. And then as I followed her, I would see how the characters really did not like her. They had many thoughts about her, but I saw her as different. I knew she had a story, and I knew for this book to be complete, her story had to be told so that the reader can understand her. They may not agree with her, they may not love her by the end, but they will hopefully understand her. And I had one person who read an advanced reader copy tell me that they thought I was fair. And that made me happy, is that I wrote a person who she does some horrible things, but at the end of the day, the depiction of her story is fair.
I agree with that completely. I think she skin crawls thinking about reading the stories of this character, but also, again, that understandable factor that she is it's such a wonderfully rendered character. On that, though, you strike me as a person who's like the exact opposite from this character. You seem like you would be a kind, forgiving, loving soul. How did you write this character so compellingly? Who just seems so far from who you seem to be.
Yes. I really wanted to think about what it is to experience loss, what it is to, I think a lot about identity. In college, I was able to write a thesis that explored identity and how identity is formed, how it's shaped, how it's challenged. And that was my goal with the Mrs., was to really explore how a person, in my opinion, I believe that most people start as good. And she actually has sort of a foil in the novel with Matthew. And I believe that, it was an example of me trying to show how I do believe that people are good. And I believe that there are situations that challenge our identity, challenge our concepts of who we are and what we are willing to do. And they can then become us, unfortunately, and change us from what we were. And so I think I had to tap a lot into trying to really explain how it is that a person can go from good to bad. Because I do believe that people are good, and I want everyone to be good. But I wanted to write a character who has, changed from that.
I mean, and for all this villainy that she enacts, there are moments where she's superhuman. She's
Yes.
never just a flat villain, and those almost hurt more than the moments of villainy, because you just like, this is a person, and
Yes.
that thin. Yeah,
Yes.
okay, you messed me up, man. Mad at you a little bit about that character, the best way possible. So about writing villains, crafting villains, did you learn anything along the way about crafting this villain? Do you have any tips or tricks for other writers that you might recommend for like any ways to approach writing this character that is both the bad guy or woman in this case, but is also a human, a
Yes.
fleshed out, complete individual?
Yes. I would say to let your mind go there. Lots of what I had to do was allow my mind to go there and see if that was true. And once my mind went there, a lot of my writing experience was writing during the day, well, pretty much writing all day. But then at night, I couldn't get my mind to shut off, because I was constantly thinking about what I had written and how true it is, and thinking about the characters and what they had done that day. So I got very little sleep while I was writing it, because I really wanted to understand why they're doing this. Why would she behave this way? It's sort of like the first novel I ever wrote, which will never be published. I was writing about a single mother taking care of 4 children after her husband dies during a winter storm in Maine. It was something like that. And my mom, she asked me, she said, "How are you going to write about a woman taking care of children? And you have no children, you're not a woman." And so I told her, I said, "I'm trying to let my mind go there. I'm trying to understand what that experience would be like. And I'm trying to put it on paper. And then I need you to tell me, is that true? Is it accurate?" And so I think when I was writing The Missus, I don't consider myself to be a hateful person, a vengeful person. However, I needed to tap into someone who does have a lot of vengeance. So I had to allow my mind to go there. And then maybe a vengeful person can read it and tell me, "Yeah, you got that right." That's
We'll find you some vengeful readers.
Yes.
Well, yeah. So going to the chat questions. So first of all, from Amy, she's never heard of discovery writing, although she gets it. Can you differentiate discovery writing from pantsing, writing by the seat of your pants?
Yes, it's pretty much, it's along the same lines. It's I sit down with a character, and I start my novels with a character, and then I try to figure out that character's story. And so, like this character was, all I knew was that he was supposed to send for her, but never did. So the first question I had to ask was, who was supposed to send for you? Because I didn't even know that. So as a discovery writer, all I knew was that there was a woman who was alone, and that someone was supposed to send for her. So discovery writing is all about asking the next question and then seeing it unfold. So once I found out that he was her husband, then I had to figure out, where did he go? What happened? Does she know where he went? Things like that.
And there's the Japanese author Haruki Murakami in an interview says that if he writes a murder on the first page, he spends the next 300 pages figuring out what happened.
Yes.
That sort of, we talk about inciting incidents in terms of plot, but it also in terms of just writing sometimes. That thing that starts and you just,
yes.
And the right incident, the right moment propels you forward all the way through however many pages. So I love that. How did you begin your life as a writer? When did you first think of yourself as a writer? Did you study writing at some point?
Yes. So I went to college. I went to Amherst College determined to be a writer, determined that I had talent. And I was quickly told that I wasn't at the level of the other students. It was sort of, and that was during my freshman year, during my first semester. And so it was the kick I needed. I tell that story a lot, but it was the kick I needed to really focus on my style of writing. So I spent the next couple years at Amherst really trying to mimic other styles. And once I realized that I wasn't successful in mimicking other styles, I then realized, okay, let me write about what I know. And that doesn't mean that I'm limited to what I know. it means that I start with some type of basis that I love and that I know and that I can really describe. And so that began the journey. And I think I didn't consider myself a writer until I received a contract. So until I received a contract from Blackstone Publishing, which I was so happy to receive. But every step along the way, I was filled with a lot of doubt, and the doubt, it would come and go, because there were some times where even in writing this book where I felt that I was amazing. I said, I am so good. And then the next day I would sit down to write and I would say, I'm the worst writer. I cannot even write a sentence. And so I think having finished the novel let me know at least I can finish a novel, but I still didn't feel like a writer. It wasn't until I actually received a contract that I felt like a writer. And I even asked Annie, our literary agent, we met for lunch one day. I said, do you think this is gonna sell? And she said, I wouldn't have signed you if I didn't think. I was like, okay.
I mean, just speaking personally, you are not alone in the, I'm a great writer, who am I kidding, thinking I'm a writer. Yeah, that up and down is pretty much every other day. There's, yeah. Like this, I could read the same thing 2 days in a row that I wrote and like it one day and hate it the next. I don't know.
Yes.
So the lesson here is don't be a writer. If you're thinking about, no, everyone should be a writer. So back to the discovery writing. As a discovery writing, when did you realize that the story was complete?
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
That's a good question.
That's a very good question. I felt that, so I started to put two and two together. Things by 75% of the story. At the three quarters mark, I knew that it was coming, that things were coming together. And at this point, what would happen to the characters from those events? So that's when I knew that the story was told, and almost dealing with the aftermath of, okay, what happens next? How do you continue? What becomes of you? And so I was able to end the story, and I knew it was ending because I had answered the questions in my mind, because I'm constantly asking questions. Why is this person doing this? Why is this person doing this? Once those questions were answered, then I had to look at what becomes of these people. And then I knew I could end the story.
So the next question is, did you know how the story would end when you started? Which I think we've sort of said is no, but
yeah.
Did you realize before you reached the end where it was going by any chance? Did you have sort of an idea of the direction? I know when I'm writing, like, I don't know where I'm going. I have a similar process to yours,
yes.
But at some point, sometimes I'll end up in like, enter, type in something which is an idea for the end. Like, yes. And it can happen. Yeah, it's like, oh, this might be where I'm going, and just make that note and go back to where I was. Do you have that sort of experience, or?
I did in a slightly different way. Is I didn't know what the end would be, but I knew what the language of the end was. So for me, this is a story that's about the land as much as the characters. The land plays a big part in it, working the land, being a slave to the land, and then also being grateful for the land, because the land gives us financial opportunities, it gives us food, it gives us so many things. And so I knew that the story would end with the land, just as it begins. It begins with the land and it would end with the land. And so I was actually able to write the language of the last paragraph, not knowing how the story would get there or even what it would entail, but I knew the language of it. And it's so funny because I tell people I was reading the Bible and the language of the end was inspired by the Bible, because I just kept thinking about the story of Genesis and how this person got this person begot this person, and that inspired me when I was thinking about what is the language of the end when I'm speaking about the land.
So what inspired, so someone mentioned, besides the dream, to write this novel, but you mentioned that you went to college wanting to be a writer.
Yes.
So what inspired that? So you obviously had that inspiration before college even. So what was the inspiration to be a writer?
Yes. So I had always written. I had always written stories, and even from my earliest memories, I believe third grade, I was writing stories, and by the time I went to college, I had about 17 journals in my room, just filled with stories. And so I would write these stories, but I never let anyone read them. And finally in college, in my workshop classes, it was the first time I said, okay, I have to let people read it. People have to read my stories. They have to tell me if they're good or not. And I knew at that point that with my very first story, it was a story that was a very honest story. I think our first stories are very autobiographical. It was about a single father who was taking care of two boys, and they were very poor. And the oldest boy had gotten his girlfriend pregnant, and he was going to leave with his girlfriend and leave the youngest boy home in this abusive household. And so I didn't know how people would respond to that story, because it was a story all about trauma and generational curses and poverty and water bugs around a drainage pipe, and they're teetering. It was like a whole paragraph about a water bug, and people they were receptive to it, and they really embraced it. And so I knew at that point, okay, I have something to say. I don't know how to say it. And I spent many years after college working on, how do I say it? I have the stories that I want to tell, but how do I convey them? And I see a question that was posed just about how did my studies in psychology help me create characters? And I believe that being a double major, English and psychology, I was just as fascinated in psychology, because I wanted to know, why are we the way we are? Why am I the way I am? And so a lot of my writing is trying to figure out how did I become the way I am? And the characters, why are they the way they are? And what happened along the way?
Just for the record, I will read as many paragraphs about water bugs as you want to write. So please bring those. I'm going to a couple of my questions real quick, then back to the ones coming in. So I focused a lot on the language when I read this book. It's such, linguistically, it's an amazing feat. The novel is just a beautiful linguistic work. It works so well as language. How did that develop for you? Is that something you really focused on to develop? Is it just a byproduct of reading a lot? How did it come about?
It's it's funny. It's a lot of reading. I do read a lot, and when I sit down to write, I've always said this used to be my prayer, and I remember it. It was that these words would culminate, and God's hands would formulate them into something beautiful. And so I always think about that as I'm sitting down to write. I say, how can I say this in the best way possible? And unfortunately, it causes me to revise as I write. So I cannot write a sentence without going back and making sure it's absolutely correct. And then I write another sentence, and I have to make sure that that sentence goes with the first sentence. So, but I love it. I love when it finally comes together, and there are thousands of words that come together, hopefully, in a way that really touches people. And it gives people a true sense of the vision I have. If someone tells me they read the story and they can visualize it, they can see exactly what I'm saying, then I feel that I've done my job. And that comes with a lot of writing and rewriting. But I love the rewriting. I think getting the words down is hard, because I'm really hard on myself. But once the words are down, I can spend forever rewriting.
So with such attention to the sentences as you write them, how do you keep this forward motion of plot, of just the forward motion in general, not necessarily even plot, because there is forward motion throughout this whole book? Is that something you have trouble with, because you I'm extrapolating here, but it seems like you almost have a backward looking process to that previous sentence. How do you keep moving forward?
Yes, that actually is the biggest challenge, is because I can get lost. I can get lost in the words. I can get lost in the characters' experiences. And I think what happens is that I allow myself to get lost, and then I reread it and I see where, okay, you're too lost and you need to pick it up, you need to cut something. And that helps a lot, because I feel like my first drafts are they're pretty messy in the sense that there's so much that can be cut. And luckily Annie was a great part of that, where she was able to see, okay, it's good, but you are lost in these words. Let's get you out. Let's pull you out. And I think that's the part that I enjoy most as well, is working with an agent and working with editors to really hone in on the story and keep the beauty of it, but also hone in on the story and keep in mind that there's a reader who wants to move to the next thing eventually. They don't want to stay there forever.
They want your words. That's all they want. Just your words. Yeah. So on that though, what was one of the questions coming in? Some of my questions were about what was your publication process? How did you find your agent? How it was working with an editor? From completing this novel to getting it published? What was that like?
Yes. So the completion of the novel was awesome. It happened in 1 month, and I was completely done, and I was really happy. And then I spent 2 years trying to get a literary agent. During those 2 years, I worked on revising the novel. I read it so many times, I could read it by heart, I felt like. But I worked on revising the novel while working to get an agent. And I tell the story that I received a lot of no's, as you can imagine. I received 95 rejections. And I actually saw a video recently where they said, that's too many, you should move on. Well, I don't think so. No, I don't think so, because it was my prayer that I would get to the right person. And I really do feel that Annie was the right person. I hope she blushes from that. But I wanted a person who A, loved my story, and who B, paid just as much attention to the words and to details as possible. And that was Annie. She got the story, and she loved it. And it came at the right time, because I was at the lowest moment. I was writing a second novel, and I felt like I was the worst. And I walked to the vitamin store to get vitamins, and she called and said, I want to represent you. So that was the start of me getting a literary agent. But that took from 2013 to 2015. And then Annie and I worked on the novel together, and then we went out on submission. And I signed in 2019 with Blackstone Publishing. So the journey has been long. It's been very long. But I think the key thing is that I had an agent who was keeping me motivated. I also don't like to receive I don't want to hear rejections. I don't want to see them. I said, okay, let me know when the yes comes. And so I like to live in a fantasy world. Obviously, I write books. So I said, okay, I just want to live in this fantasy world until it happens. But it was a long process.
Yeah, I mean, some people I don't think realize how long the process can be.
Yes.
Whenever, like, we have people come into the Writer's Center sometimes who are looking, I think, almost for a quick fix to publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's almost never one, unless you want to self-publish, and there's absolutely nothing. That's great. Self-publish if you want to, but if you're going a traditional route, it can grind you down.
Yes. And
congratulations for not being ground down.
I know. It's and you know, there are hard times. I tell anyone who is trying to be a writer, there were definitely times where I didn't think it would happen. As I tried to get a literary agent, I thought, okay, maybe everyone is right. If everyone is telling me no, then obviously I am delusional and I'm crazy. And then I just had to put that out of my mind. And what helped me put it out of my mind was continuing to work on the manuscript, because I said, okay, if I can continue to make this the best it can be, and I believe in this story, and I want this to be my first novel, then I have to keep going at it. And then once I signed with Annie, her belief in it, all of a sudden I wasn't alone. Someone else had read it. And like all of a sudden they believed in it too. So I said, okay, I'm not as crazy as I thought, because at first it was just me. And now I'm like, okay, there are two crazy people out here. And so like she believes in it too. So, you know, there's a team of us.
Yeah. And I'll say one piece of advice too, is that any sort of positiveness you get from anyone along the way is honest and legitimate. If
Yes.
someone like gives you positive feedback to your manuscript but passes on it, that's the odds. They're not,
Yes.
agents aren't in the business of making you feel good. So if you have an
Yes.
agent say no, but they say nice things, they meant those nice things.
Mhm.
Take any little, like, any of the odds are so rough. I can't talk about publishing anymore because it's exhausting. So let's go back to, let's find some craft questions. So what advice do you have about writing the other? It's a big conversation in literature right now. Do you have any advice for someone who's approaching writing someone from a different background than themselves?
Yes. I think just trying to get as much understanding as possible. I think a big part of writing is putting yourself in everyone's shoes. So when you're writing, you're an outsider because you're looking at this character and you're trying to understand them, but at some point you're inside and you're getting glimpses that no one else gets. So for me, writing the Mrs., a character who is a white woman who treats African Americans pretty meanly. Um, I'm not white and I'm not a female and I've never had children, but stepping into her shoes, trying to understand, I think that's the only way to bring some understanding, because these are crazy times, and I hope that this book brings some healing in that regards, is that it's trying to understand people. It's trying to understand something that's different from me. And so I think to write someone who's different, you have to step into their shoes, and you have to, it forces you to see the humanity in them first. You see, okay, they're a person too. It's not some weird entity that's non-human. They're a person, and what are their motivations and what has led them to this point? And I think at that point you can truly write the other.
Right. Do you use any specific writers tools in your writing practice? Any technology, anything like that, from notebooks to?
I wish I did. I wish I did. I see, I see stories of other people who use certain tools. I just use Word, and I use Word and I use my phone, because the notes feature on my phone, every day when I'm in the writing process, in the revision process, I have a hard time sleeping because thoughts are coming to me, and I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm stuck with these thoughts and I need to put them down on paper. And so I'll roll over, I sleep with my phone in the bed. I'll roll over, pick up my phone, type in the notes of what I'm thinking, and then try to go back to sleep. And so
How often are they gibberish?
actually, because I do suffer from insomnia when I write, unfortunately, they are crystal clear. Although recently I wrote something and I still don't know what I meant by it. It seemed inspired at the time, but it was pretty bad and it was cut. But yeah, I don't use any writing tools, but I do say that my notes feature on my cell phone has so many sentences and thoughts, things like that.
So you mentioned that the opening line was the thing that came, you wrote that line after the dream.
Yes.
Is the opening line now, I can't remember is it the same opening line, the same opening paragraph? Has that evolved since that initial moment? Or is that
Yes.
sort of, okay.
It actually evolved. It's funny because it's still near the beginning of the book, but I think it's like the second paragraph now. But as I wrote the story, I saw that I didn't know that the land would be as much a character as the actual characters. And once I saw that the land was an actual character as well, at that point, and I knew that the story would end with the land, I started it with the land as well. So I went back and said, okay, let me pretend as if I'm that smart, and I plugged it in.
No, you're that smart.
Yes.
Take it, it's you. Yeah. So did you have, talking community, did you have encouragement of mentors or friends in your development as a writer? And the follow-up was, that is, could anything have caused you to give up along the way, or did you have the right support system in place?
Yeah, I definitely had the encouragement of friends. I didn't have a big writing community, and I didn't let anyone read it. Annie was the first person, my agent was the first person who actually read it. And so I spent a lot of time feeling as if I was crazy, because these characters were real. and these experiences were real in my head, and no one else knew they were real except for me. And so once Annie joined, I felt like, okay, I got a team. Someone else knows that they're real. And so, but along the way, I had support of friends, and my friends would always encourage me. And then it got to a point where I had to tell them to stop encouraging me, stop asking about the book, because, you know, when you receive enough rejections, your friends want to keep you inspired, and they want to be in tune with your life. So they say, how's it going? Have you heard anything? So eventually they stopped asking the questions, but just the looks they gave, you know, just the encouraging looks of, you'll get there, buddy. It's okay. that was good enough to really keep me going. I don't think there was ever a time where I thought I would stop. I could keep going. If I didn't have an agent and a book coming out right now, I would still be pushing for the same book, for an agent, for a publisher, because I believed in it. I would be writing other things too, but I would still be pushing.
Yeah. Has writing gotten easier for you?
I wouldn't say it's easier. I would say what's gotten easier, especially working on the second novel, is, and someone told me this, I think it was Meg Gardner. I recently spoke to her, and she was telling me that, you know, after the first book that you write, that it teaches you that you can write it, that you can finish it, you can write another one. And that's the one thing that's gotten easier, because as I've been working on the second novel, I've never doubted that it would be completed. I still had the same frustrations. I still had the same feelings of being that I'm not legitimate. And I don't know if that ever goes away, because there are moments of genius where I write something and I say, this is really great, Annie's gonna love this. And then I look at it, I go to write the next day and I say, oh my goodness, this is horrible. But completing a novel has taught me that I can do it. And so I'm not afraid to start a novel anymore.
So since you became serious about your writing craft, has your lifestyle changed? Do you box your friends and family into your writing schedule? Do you have this, how do you regiment yourself?
So actually everything is still pretty much the same. No one reads anything I write. It's true, no one reads anything I write, but, and my schedule has stayed the same actually. When I write, when I'm working on a project, I start in the morning, I wake up and I start early in the morning, and I write until about 1. I'll have a lunch if I feel that I'm able to stop, and then I'll write again until dinner, and then I'll write again until late in the night. Everything is pretty much the same.
Can I just say real quickly to everyone on this chat that is abnormal. That much writing in a day is not normal, my friend.
I think it's because I'm revising as I go. If I would just write the story, it would just be like, I could do it in a couple hours and and be done for the day. But I spend less time writing and more time revising. And I feel like I have to do it because I'll never get it done. I would be writing this for years if I didn't.
Like, I'm happy if I get 45 minutes of actual writing time in the morning. Like, yeah, that was a good day. You're over here pulling 12 hours.
Right. Yep.
Oh, all right. Anyone else have any other questions to share in the chat? I think I hit them all. I was scrolling through them and it's hard to follow, but if anyone has any other questions, let me know. I have a couple more minutes here, so I will glance at on character development, because there's so many great and unique characters. You have such a focus on the sentence level that it's, I mean, you talk about this focus, but then your characters all have very distinct personalities. They all have distinct motivations. Do your characters come about easily? Do they ever surprise you? How does character happen for you?
Yes. The characters, I feel they come about easily, but then they surprise me. The two brothers who arrive at the farm, when they came, it wasn't a surprise. I didn't know they were coming, but when the cotton picker showed up, they showed up. And I said, oh, okay, they're here. And so, but their personalities surprised me immediately. and just the role of protector that the older brother plays for the younger brother. It was quite instinctual because I have a brother who's 3 years older who he fits that role. You know, I've always had an older brother to look up to. So that's been really nice. And so these characters fell in line with that, but they would do things like just a look, some looks, or, you know, and it would surprise me. And when it surprised me, it often surprised the narrator, Bernice. And I knew, okay, you know, this is interesting because she's surprised, I'm surprised, we're all like being shocked by what they're doing. Bernice never surprised me. She was pretty even keel. Although sometimes I wanted to just shake her and do something different. Don't do this, don't do that, you know. And
but she's such a great observational narrator. She falls in that she's that genre of narrator, and she's so good at it. So.
Yeah.
So you hit on this a little bit earlier, but the idea of replicating writers you admire, and some people say that you should do that, and you said you might have had some issues with that. Is that good advice, to replicate writers you admire? Was that something to do and then abandon? Is it something just to always try? What do you think that is?
I don't think it's a bad thing, actually, because I love James Baldwin, and I don't think I could have written this novel. I could not have written this novel had I not read James Baldwin and fallen in love with James Baldwin. And it was learning what he did, studying his sentences, studying how he describes a Black church. Like, that fascinated me. And he was so spot on accurate. And it made me want to be as accurate as he described these experiences. And so I think it's okay to study writers who do things well, and to even try to replicate those things in your writing, but then to develop your own voice.
All right. Well, we're coming up at the end of our hour. Amy, if I could ask you to put the relevant links back in the Zoom chat to buy books, to donate to the Writer's Center via Venmo, PayPal, or go to our website, writer.org. But yes, definitely please pre-order this book. It's fantastic.
Please do.
It's you also got your starred review from Booklist.
Library Journal.
Library Journal, yeah. So you'll see it in some libraries, but it's reviews are coming in and they're positive. Everything has been good, and I hope that we will be seeing a lot more of this book going forward. And then finally, I'll stay on the chat for a little while longer. Ed, if you're able to, we'll just open up some microphones and hang out for a bit. You're welcome to. The official part of the event is done. We'll sit here, finish our fine beers, and have a casual moment before we're done for the evening. But thank you all so much for coming. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I am going to be pushing this book hard out into the world, because I want massive success for you today, tomorrow, and always. And thanks so much.
Yeah, and if I can tell people to please follow me on Instagram at Edward A. Farmer, also on Facebook, Edward A. Farmer. My website is edwardafarmer.com. So everything Edward A. Farmer. If you follow that, you'll be able to see the progress this little novel that could is making. So yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to, if you want to chat and hang out, you're welcome to unmute yourself. We'll be here for a few more minutes. And that's us. Thanks so much.